So if you're like me and you moved into an old house with these ugly kind of duplex receptacles, they're old, they're scratched up, they're pretty loose, and you want to switch them out, first thing you got to do is you got to know which circuit they're on, and you got to be able to turn the power off to them in order to work on them. Now, if your home's electrical panel isn't really labeled that well, or it's not labeled at all, you're going to want to get one of these Klein Tools circuit breaker finders. What this is going to allow you to do is find out which circuit your outlets are on that you want to switch out. So first step is to detach this back part and plug it into the outlet. Two lights here indicate that, which you can see in the camera. There you go. Two lights indicate it's wired up correctly. You have a little code here on the top, tells you how to troubleshoot, but two lights means it's wired correctly and it means there's power there. Go ahead, scan both sides. Then scan one side. Now when it beeps and the red light flashes like that without any green, that's when you know you found the right one. To make sure it's the right one, go ahead, flip it off. And come on over here, double check and make sure that those lights are now off. That means there's no more power to your outlets. Next thing you'll do is you'll come back over to that circuit breaker that you found, in my case, number 11. You're gonna look at the number right here on the switch. If it says 20, you're gonna need 12 gauge wire, and if it says 15, you're gonna need 14 gauge wire. After you made sure there's no power going to any of the outlets you're working on, you'll then just go ahead and remove all the outlets from the wall by unscrewing them. So after you unscrew these two screws here, go ahead, pull the outlet out by these tabs. Make sure you don't reach in this way and touch these terminals, just in case you messed up and there's still some kind of power going to the outlet that you didn't find. Or maybe there's one outlet that's not on the same circuit. So pull by these two tabs, pull it out from the wall, and then leave it there. So now you should have all your outlets pulled away from the wall. And then you're going to do one last test just to make sure you're not going to get shocked. Mainly running across the black wires, but you can also test the white, neutral, ground. Just a real quick around, make sure nothing's beeping. Do that on all of your outlets before we move on to the next step. So next thing that we're going to do is, you can see these outlets are all backstabbed, which a lot of electricians will disagree with. This is an old home, seems pretty common. That's the way that they used to do them. But what I'm gonna be doing is actually pigtailing all of my wires, and that will put all the outlets in parallel rather than in series. What I'm gonna do is actually take a pair of linements, and I'm just gonna go and snip off one-handed. Yeah. So snip here. Try to just cut them as close to the back of the outlet as you can. It's kind of hard with one hand, but you get the idea. So cut them all as close as you can, and then we're gonna re-strip them. So I've cut all the wires. Now I'm gonna take a pair of strippers, and I'm actually going to strip these back down, leaving about, maybe 3/8 of an inch. And then do that to the other 3 wires here. And the amount that I'm doing these is for the wago nuts that I'm going to be using to actually pigtail the wires. All right, so obviously ground's already stripped. So now go ahead, cut and strip the rest of all the wires for all of the remaining outlets. So in the next step, I'm going to be showing you how I actually pigtail the wires. I do pigtails because, for a few reasons actually. One, most electricians will tell you to do pigtails because it keeps everything in parallel, which ends up being better in case one of the outlets goes bad. Also, my house is pretty old. I don't know why, but back in the day, they did not leave a lot of extra wire. So it becomes really hard to rewire new outlets, especially if you have to snip wire off, in my case, because they were backstabbed. So it'll help prevent the rest of the wires from becoming shorter and shorter. And I'll show you what I mean. And a lot of you guys will say, oh, why are you pigtailing? It's so pointless. Well, one, I'm doing it because I like the idea of everything being in parallel. And two is for this reason. So see here, code requires at least 3 inches of wire from the end of the box. Now, I don't have a tape measure on me, but that's just barely 3 inches. But if you come over here, these wires are not 3 inches. And in order for me to make it easier on myself and prevent these wires from getting any shorter in the future, pigtailing with some wago nuts is going to be the quickest and simplest solution. As long as you can get all the wires to fit in the box properly, it's going to end up being easier in the long run and will save the wires in the box. So this is my method on pigtailing the wires. It's going to be on the floor here, crisscross applesauce. These are also tamper resistant. You can see the TR on the face. I've got my 12 gauge wire here. And what I'm going to do is cut about, maybe 5 inches. And I'm going to be doing 6 outlets. So I'm going to cut 5 pieces of 5-inch wire off of this strand. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Then you can either use your strippers or your strip from your wire strippers in order to cut that. Pull all these out, or you can use a utility knife, just cut down the middle. Go ahead, separate them, blacks, whites. You don't need the grounds because what we're gonna do is just all of the grounds from the old outlets are all twisted together. So I'm actually just going to leave those twisted together and use them on the new outlets. It's gonna save some time. And those don't need to be pigtailed, just having them connected and then connected to the receptacle will be a sufficient ground. If you look at your wago nuts, you see this little number here. Hopefully you can see that in the camera. There's 2 lines with arrows in between them. Hopefully you can see that. That's how long you should strip the end of the wire that's gonna go into your wago nut. One end, I'm gonna strip that much. So you can see, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but try to get it as close as possible. And then on the other end, I'm gonna strip it a little bit further, maybe, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to candy cane it so that you get a piece that looks like this. This candy cane end is going to go on the new receptacle, and then that end is going to go into the wago nut. Next, you're going to grab However many outlets you're switching out, -1. I'm going to take my black hot wire and I'm going to connect it to a brass. The only thing here that you want to make sure of is that you're staying consistent. So we're only going to be connecting to 1 brass and 1 silver. So just make sure that if you're doing brass on top, you do silver on top. And brass on bottom, silver on bottom. Whether you do bottom or top doesn't matter, as you keep them consistent on both sides. Hook this around, and you want the hook of your wire to be going. If my screw is turning this way, I want the small end of my hook to be going that way as well, so that when I tighten it down, it's actually making it into a tighter clamp. Take a flathead, wrench it in, give it a test. Needs a little bit more. As long as you're testing it and making sure it's in there nice and snug, it's not gonna pop out, you're good. So then you're gonna do the next side. So notice I'm on top, so I'm gonna go top here as well. Now you got them both in. Okay, and then you can go ahead and loosen up your ground screw. All right, so you should have now a few of these. A receptacle with a hot on a brass and a neutral on a silver. And they should be on the same level, top or bottom. So double check them all, make sure you didn't mix any up on accident. Awesome. Next thing you'll do is you'll take a 3-wire wago nut and you're going to attach it onto each one. Make sure it's seated all the way down. You can see in the back of the wago whether or not it's seated all the way in. Go ahead, tug on all your wagos, make sure they're all connected. All right, so now we're ready to go and attach them. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is make a hook on my ground wire. Then I'll take my new receptacle and I'll hook that in, crank it down, crank with the screwdriver. Now here comes the easy part. If we weren't using wagos and we didn't do it this way, we'd have to sit there, try to pigtail using twisting and a wire nut. Now here, all we do is we turn this and we attach one wire go. And 2 wires. Give it a tug. Now we're almost done. Same thing for the hot. One. two. Make sure they're all seated. Give it a tug. Now we're going to push it back nice and clean. Into our box. And attach our screws. And that one's done. Go ahead, do that to the rest of your outlets, and I'll see you back. So here's the reason why we only made, we made one less of those outlets before, where we put the wire on each terminal and then used a wago nut. The reason why I did one less is because typically when you get to the end of an outlet run, you only are left with one set of wires. So in that case, I'm actually going to strip these a little bit more because I stripped them for a wago, but I need a little bit more length. And then we're gonna candy cane the rest of these, and then just go ahead and attach your outlets the same way that you put those pigtail ends on that we did in the first part. So it's back in, and so then go back to your breaker, switch it on, take your plug tester and go ahead, test each outlet. You should have two lights on the right